G'day guys, Steve with Broken Sprocket. In this video I'm going to be replacing the rocker cover gasket on my 2009 Hilux 4x4. This is the 1KD diesel engine. So let's get started. Okay, I've got the replacement parts that I require. Seems as though this is the main one that I need because it looks like it's leaking out of the main gasket. But it also has seals and stuff like that that go where the injectors and things like that go. And these things here, I don't know where they go, but I guess we'll figure it out as we go along. First thing I need to do is remove the intercooler and any associated parts so that we can get to the rocker cover, and then we'll go from there. Okay, with that top cover gone, I need to remove this one here to take that air hose off. A couple of plugs which are mounted to this intercooler. 4 bolts each here. And then I've got the rubber hose there that's joining the pipe together for the intercooler, and it should be able to come off. Okay, now I've got the intercooler off. There are bolts along the side of the rocker cover here, and you can see the oil that's been leaking out. It seems to be worse at the back end of the engine. So I'll have to remove this rubber hose, all of those bolts along both sides. These cables here, they have to be removed, and the fuel lines will need to be removed, each single one. I'll also put a rag inside this intake so nothing gets in there, and I just want to give these area a bit of a clean up before I take them off to hopefully prevent any form of contamination. Just a little bit of carby cleaner, and hopefully it just keep that area a little bit cleaner and prevent any form of contamination. Okay, next up are these fuel lines. Need to crack them off. They're a 17mm spanner. Come on. Ooh, they're tight. Once you crack them, they spin off easily enough. To get these fuel lines to sit up a little bit to give me some room, I just put a piece of wood that's a bit shaped like a wedge underneath the lines just to lift them up a little. I also had to loosen this mounting bracket off a little bit so they could move a little. Okay, need to remove these rubber seals. They pop out pretty easy. So the whole 4 of them need to come out. Now to remove the rocker cover takes a little bit of wiggling and a bit of jiggling and a bit of stuff like that. Probably would be easier if you remove the fuel lines all the way, but it is more work, and you can, with just a little bit of wiggling about and a little bit of placement, you can get them out without having to remove those lines. Okay, that took a little bit of wiggling to get that out, but you can kind of see on this section here, that seems to be where the gasket was leaking. You can see build up here, so it was definitely leaking on this side, so that needs a real good clean up. Also on the rocker cover, it's got these little metal dowels. You can see some of them have lifted. First check, make sure all of them are still in it, because they need to be in it, and make sure none of them have fallen into the engine as you're taking that cover off, because that cover takes a little bit of twisting and a little bit of wiggling to get off. Okay, I want to give where it seals a really good clean up with some carby cleaner to really get this surface nice. So I'll do that all the way around. I also want to make sure that there's nothing that's been going into these where the fuel lines go into where the injector section is. Okay, I've got this mating surface looking pretty good all the way around the whole head there. But where this cam sort of locks on here, there was a little bit of gasket goo or gasket maker or something like that. So I'll need to scrape that off, and I'll just place a little bit more around this area here to make sure that that gets a good seal before I put the tapper cover back on. Okay, I've just given the tapper cover a really good clean up. Make sure there's no contaminants on it, so less chance of contaminating anything when I put it back on. I've also checked around the edges for cracking, because this is made of plastic, and I have seen many reports that they can crack. This one seems to be quite good. Now I need to remove these seals here, so they will need to be removed and replaced with the new ones. And also the actual gasket that's been leaking needs to be replaced, so I need to do that as well. Remove this one. You can see evidence of the sealer and stuff like that here, so I'll also add a little bit more sealer just along this edge here where the cam comes out. Okay, with all of those removed, just going to put a little bit of spray on them, help them slide in a little bit easier, and they just push in. Okay, now that they're replaced, time to actually replace the actual rocker cover gasket. It should just peel off once you get the first bit out. Okay, I just want to run a little bit of gasket maker along this section here because it had some there previously, so I'll just duplicate that again. Okay, where those rubber seals sit around these sections here on the injectors, I'm just going to run a little bit of oil around the edges on all of them, just so that they slide on with minimal fuss. A little bit of oil. Now where the fuel line goes in, I've also made them very clean around this areas here. I've given them a good clean out and got the blower in there, make sure there's no contaminants in there. So now it's time to put the rocker cover back on. Okay, now that I have the rocket cover in place and it's ready to go down, I'm just going to run my fingers along the bottom edge here and make sure that that gasket hasn't popped off in any way. So double check. It all feels pretty good so far. Okay, I've got the tapper cover back in place now. That section that was sealed with the gasket maker is all nice and good. I've checked the whole perimeter of the base on the tappet cover to make sure that it hasn't popped off on the gasket anywhere, so that's all sealing good, so it should be good. Where the injector seals sit is good. I just got to put those seals back in this side here, the new ones, and then it's ready to anchor down. The new seals, I'm just going to put a little bit of spray on them so that they go in nice and easy. They slide in nice. Okay, put these bolts and nuts that go back into the tappet cover back in place. I'm not going to tighten them yet, I'm just going to sit them in there. Okay, all the nuts and bolts are in place, they're not tight, but now I just want to put these fuel lines back in place. Make sure they're in. I don't know the exact torque specs that these fuel lines go into, so I'm just sort of going until they're a bit tight and then just giving them a little nudge, and that should be plenty. You certainly don't want to strip them out. The tappet cover, I just go loose on it first, but I go diagonal. There's no pressure on this, so it's not tight or nothing yet. It's just putting it down nice and even. Now that I have the rocker cover bolts all just in place and only just snug on, I'm just going to go over by hand and I'm going to torque them up just a little bit. You've got to remember you're going into an alloy head. The bolts are only small, so they don't want much cranking, and also this tappet cover is plastic, so even though it has steel dowels in it, you still don't want to go over mad on it. So the way I do that is I just go over it, and I don't have much leverage on the ratchet. I just basically turn it like this here, and that gives me enough torque to tighten this down so it won't leak and the bolts won't come out, but I'm not over tightening it. That feels good enough for me. Just enough tension, and you're only on this part of the ratchet, so there's not massive leverage like if you're back here and really levering. That would be enough. Now I'm just going to go into a diagonal style of pattern so they all go down, so that feels good. Feels nice. That one's really loose. Now, of course, you can torque this down to the correct torque specs, but with minor things like this, I like to do it by hand just to get a good feel on how things are, because if you were in the bush and you had to do something like this, you sort of got to rely on your hands because you're only going to have minimal tools there. Now, if it was head bolts or something major, of course, I would be doing it with the proper torque specs and with a torque wrench. Okay, now the tappet cover tightened, and plug all these wires back in. Basically got the engine back together now, but I forgot to put this little bit of bracketry on here, so I should be able to get that with a spanner and just put that piece back on. Okay, I've got the rest of the engine back together now. There was a little piece there and I forgot to put a little bracket on there, but I managed to get that on, so that's fine. I'm going to start the engine. Hopefully no lights come on my dash that become problematic. So hopefully that'll happen. We'll have a check of that. And I'm going to degrease the engine down because there's a lot of oil that has gone to the back of the engine and just been dropping down from that leaking. I won't be able to tell unless it has a major leak if it's leaking straight away. But over the next couple of months or so, I'll just keep an eye on it and make sure there's nothing leaking or weeping. So let's check out and see if there's any lights on. Okay, let's go to start her up. It took a little bit of starting because there was no fuel in those injector lines. And it's looking pretty good. No lights have come on, that's only the seatbelt warning light. Doors open. Turn that off. Turn that off. And yeah, that's pretty good. As you can see, this is a very high kilometer engine. This engine has given me absolutely no problems whatsoever. So I'm pretty happy with this motor. Now you can see the back of my engine there, where the gearbox and that is, that's a lot of oil that's been dropping, and it's all been coming from the top section of that rocker cover. So that's how badly this one has been leaking. And to be honest, I've been a little bit slack and it's been leaking for quite some time. Okay, that's me done here. Looks like everything's in good order. I'll just keep an eye on it, make sure nothing is leaking. I'll give it a good degrease down, make sure that engine's nice and clean, and make sure that that isn't leaking. If you like this kind of thing, consider subscribing, and you can also follow Broken Sprocket on Instagram. See you next time.